This is one of the more interesting things that has come out of the Trump trial. Oh, you know, Atrios has done a good, you can go to Atrios and see this exchange. They questioned Michael Cohen about his relationship with some reporters. They included a whole crew of different people that Cohen had a relationship with. Here's one. Some of the reporters you had a very strong relationship with include folks like Chris Cuomo. Yes. Katie Tur. Yes. We talked a little bit on Tuesday about a reporter named Maggie Haberman. Yes, sir. So taking for a few minutes talking about Ms. Haberman. Who does she work for? He answers, she's with the New York Times. And over the years, let me ask you this. When did you first meet Ms. Haberman? Over 20 years ago. So you met before so early 2000. Yes. Over the years, you have a very strong, would you describe your relationship with her very strong? I would, Cohen said. You asked her to write positive stories about you, correct? Answer, correct. As a matter of fact, when you started in your official role in 2017 as President Trump's personal attorney, you asked her to write a story and say what a great idea it was. Answer, I asked her if she would write a story. Question, that was my question, saying how good it was that you had a role for President Trump, right? Yes, sir. And in exchange for that, you would give tips to Ms. Haberman, correct? Not in exchange. I would use Ms. Haberman if the story was something I believed the New York Times would run. And if it wasn't the New York Times style story, I would go to a different newspaper. Question, but there were a number of times when you gave Ms. Haberman a scoop, as you testified about on Tuesday. Answer, yes, sir. The point of this is to show you, when you hear the term beet sweetener, what's going on. A beet sweetener is when you find a source and you decide, I'm going to only report positive things about this source. And they're going to feed me stories. Mm-hmm. And there'll be stories that'll be stories I wouldn't have had access to, or I'll get more details about a story or a different angle than other people. And the argument is from these reporters, when they get accused of doing beet sweeteners, puff pieces that essentially get them access, is that this is journalism. You don't understand. We keep the public informed. But you have to ask yourself, is there really any value to getting these stories if you have to trade obscuring the truth with other stories? Like, is there any way in which this relationship with Michael Cohen that Maggie Haberman had edified, made the public understand more of how Donald Trump operated than if she didn't have access to this and had and reporters had a at least mildly antagonistic, if not agnostic, perspective on these people? Because we didn't learn anything of substance, I would argue, from Michael Cohen until Donald Trump had kicked him out of the inner circle where he couldn't learn anything. So in other words, you don't have to have a reporter who is sweetening that beat, particularly in the run-up to the election and after the fact, because on balance, we're not getting anything of benefit anyways. On balance. And in fact, we're getting things obscured, whether it's like, Bob Woodward talking about revelations about Bush, years after he had found them out, but wanted to save it for his book back in the day, or just countless numbers of stories of reporters holding back on stuff. Maybe they'll write it as a book if they think that era is over and they can, finally fall out of grace with those sources. I mean,
she wrote a best-selling book. That was part of it. I mean, in 2022, she wrote a book about Donald Trump, so she cashed in.
Journalism
Right.
is printing what someone else does not want printed. Everything else is public relations, said George Orwell.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even realize this until just like looking this up. That her mother was a media communications executive. This is just on her Wikipedia at Rubenstein Associates. At that firm, a quote publicity powerhouse whose eponymous founder has been called the Dean of Damage Control by Rudy Giuliani. Haberman's mother worked for a client list of influential New Yorkers, including Donald Trump. So she got that connection, I think, from an early age, and then she rose to the top.
Well, to be fair, her father was also a New York Times reporter.
Yeah, and like cozying up to sources is a part of journalism, right? It's about establishing trust. But then when you're printing something, as you say, Sam, that you know is basically a little bit far from the truth in order to just paint a flattering portrait of somebody for your source in exchange for more information, that's when you cross ethical boundaries. And I just wish this is, example a million, where I wish there were cameras in the courtroom, because Maggie Haberman has been in the courtroom every single day reporting on this story because Trump is her beat now.
I think it's unethical, but I think like even more important, like I think like you could make an argument that I need to do X to do Y, and that on balance Y is better for the public in the country. But like this idea that journalists and that some journalists have, that what they do is outside the sort of like flow or of history in some way, outside of sort of reality. Like I'm just an alien, and nothing I print has implications or this and that. I'm just creating a record. But you're not. Because if you're putting out stuff that is garbage or one-sided to support your source, then your overall product is misleading people as much as whatever you think is opening the window. And you're undercutting people's ability to rely on what you report. Far more helpful for society, it seems to me, to have slightly less information, but a trust that the reporters are out there and are operating under one specific agenda, which is to just get as much information as possible without having to kowtow to anyone of the people they're reporting on's agenda.
Quality over quantity. And the New York Times is no stranger to their reporters cozying up to sources in ways that were deemed extremely problematic.
You would think after Judy Miller,
maybe they would have some, like, the implications for this are just less dire because it wasn't leading us into an illegal war where we killed hundreds of thousands of people. But it's more gossipy, I feel like Haberman's beat is with Trump. But either way, the fact that, like, it's been a bad year for the New York Times, and I think this is instructive for people when analyzing critically the paper of record.
I mean, more than a year in some instances, but I would say bad for the Times.
I just mean particularly since October 7th, it's been atrocious.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.